So the trial balance of L. O'Shea, a boutique owner, failed to agree on the last day of the year in 2007. So on checking the books, the following errors were discovered. Number 1, an overdraft of €400 in the bank account had been brought down on the incorrect side of the nominal ledger. So that's just general ledger, don't worry about that fancy name for it. And consequently had been entered on the incorrect side of the trial balance. So the 400 bank overdraft should have went down on the credit side, but it was put down on the debit side. Number 2, O'Shea sold privately owned jewellery to a debtor of the business on credit for €2,800. This sale had been treated in error as a cash sale of stock. O'Shea intended that the proceeds of this sale were to be retained in the business. Number 3, a debtor who owed L. O'Shea €700 sent a cheque for €550 and €100 in cash in full settlement. This was correctly entered in the books. However, no entry had been made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or of the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. O'Shea won a motor vehicle valued €20,000 in a grand prize draw. L. O'Shea gave the vehicle to the business and took an old van from the business valued at €8,000, which was to be used for private purposes. The only entry made in the firm's books regarding both motor vehicles was a debit in the cash book of €8,000. Number 5 then, cash payments of €160 for repairs to the business motor vehicle and €100 for repairs to private motor vehicles had both been credited to the creditor's account and also credited to the motor vehicle's account. So you are required to, Part A, journalise the necessary corrections for 50 marks. So what you need to do is take out your green and your red pen and underline the items that should have been recorded, so the transaction that should have been recorded in green, and then the mistake, please underline that in red. So if you want to pause the video now and then attempt that yourself and then come back and check that you're right. Okay, so hopefully this is what you have. So we're going to go through each of these individually in detail now. So number 1, an overdraft of €400 in the bank account had been brought down on the incorrect side of the nominal ledger and consequently had been entered on the incorrect side of the trial balance. So what should have happened? Well, a bank overdraft should be credited because that would be a liability. Okay, but what happened by mistake was that it was put on the debit side, so it was put in as an asset there. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, to get the bank from being 400 on the debit to being 400 on the credit, we're going to have to add 800 on the credit. And as you know, in accounting, we need to have an equal number of debits and credits. So your assets and your debits and your credits didn't equal there. So what we have to do is we have to create this suspense account and enter 800 then on the debit side so that your debits and credits equal. Number 2 then. Okay, so that has to go in there. Sorry, and you need to do your narration then. So being correction of overdraft brought down on the incorrect side of the bank account. Okay, so number 2. O'Shea sold privately owned jewellery to a debtor of the business on credit for €2,800. This sale had been treated in error as a cash sale of stock, and O'Shea intends that the proceeds of this sale were to be retained in the business. Alright, so O'Shea sold privately owned jewellery to a debtor of the business on credit for €2,800. Okay, so the privately owned jewellery, right? Now, O'Shea does have a boutique, right? But when they sell privately owned something to a debtor of the business, that is capital being introduced, okay? And then the debtor owes the money. So the capital introduced is a liability because the business ultimately owes that money back to O'Shea. So capital introduced 2,800 on the credit side, and the debtor is going to be 2,800 on the debit side because that is an asset increasing. Now, what happened by mistake? This sale had been treated in error as a cash sale of stock. Okay, so it was treated as sales and that we received cash for that sale. So sales is recorded on the credit side, 2,800 there, and cash is recorded on the debit side, 2,800 there. So how are we going to fix this? So we're going to enter the capital and we're going to enter the debtor. All right, and then with our sales and cash, we need to unwind this. Okay, so we're going to enter them in the opposite sides to unwind those mistakes. All right, so then I put them then into the face of my journalized of my entries then. So capital 2,800 on the credit side, debtor 2,800 on the debit side, sales 2,800 on the debit side, and then cash 2,800 on the credit side. So our narration could be there, being correction of sale of private jewellery to a debtor, to a business debtor treated incorrectly. Okay, now number 3. All right, so a debtor who owed L. O'Shea €700 sent a cheque for €550 and €100 in cash in full settlement. This was correctly entered in the books. However, no entry had been made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or of the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. Okay, so I haven't underlined the first sentence, okay? Why have I not done that? Because this second sentence is telling me that the cheque was recorded correctly in the books. So a debtor who owed L. O'Shea sent a cheque, okay, for $550 and $100 in cash in full settlement. So O'Shea received that cheque and they received that cash, and they must have also given the debtor a discount. All right, so that was recorded correctly in the books. However, no entry had been made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or of the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. Okay, so what should have happened here? Well, what we need to do, when we receive the cheque, we would record a cheque come in here, debit side $550. So to show that it was dishonoured, $550 needs to go into the credit side then to unwind that. When the debtor had sent the cheque, okay, and we had given them the discount of €50, we would have reduced the debtor by 600, so we would have put it down here. So we are going to unwind that and we are going to enter it on the debit side. So that's the next thing that we do. We would have, when we received the cheque, we gave the debtor a discount of €50, and that discount would be recorded here on the debit side. We are now unwinding that discount. So that was discount allowed, disallowed. So we just put it on the credit side. So that €50 there, credit side. So recording the dishonoured cheque, what have we done? Let's talk about this again. We have put $550 on the credit side of the bank account to show that the cheque actually didn't come into the bank. We are now increasing the debtor again because they now owe us that amount of that cheque, the $550, and the discount that we had previously given to them. We'll unwind that too. So $600 they owe us now, and the discount $50 on the credit side. And then what we're going to have to do is write off the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. So that's €600 that we just increased the debtor by. We're now going to reduce that by €600 because they have been written off. So the debtor has been written off. We're writing off bad debt there, not going to pay us. Then to the bad debts written off account, the expense account, we are going to debit that. So what happened by mistake was that absolutely nothing was entered into the accounts. So how do we fix this then? So what we do, we just enter in what should have happened. Okay, so we enter that now into our part 3. So bank, $550 on the credit side, debtor, $600 on the debit and credit side, discount, €50 on the credit side, and bad debts, €600 on the debit side. So the narration there then being recording of a dishonoured cheque and recording of a bad debt. All right. So then part 4. So we have O'Shea won a motor vehicle valued at €20,000 in a grand prize draw. O'Shea gave the vehicle to the business and took an old van from the business valued at €8,000, which is to be used for private purposes. Now, what we could have left this blank either, because we don't have to record that he won it in a prize draw. So that was just a bit of information to tell us that he won it personally and the amount of the value of the vehicle. Okay, so what happened by mistake was that the only entry made in the firm's books regarding both motor vehicles was a debit in the cash book of €8,000, so completely wrong. All right, so what should have happened? Well, O'Shea gave a motor vehicle to the business. All right, so what we need to do is capital €20,000, okay, and then motor vehicle €20,000. Now, it's in motor vehicle and not purchases. We've seen it that when we give a vehicle before in other questions that it goes into purchases. So why is it not purchases in this question? It's not purchases because, all right, O'Shea does not sell motor vehicles. O'Shea is a boutique owner, so he sells or she sells, clothes or whatever, all right? So that goes into, we're debiting the motor vehicle account there. So motor vehicle is increasing by €20,000 and my capital is increasing by €20,000. Capital is liability, motor vehicle is an asset. L. O'Shea gave this vehicle to the business and took an old van from the business valued €8,000, which was to be used for private purposes. So €8,000 then is going to come out of our motor vehicle account. So overall we have 12,000 being debited there, 12,000 being increased. And in the capital account, 8,000 has been taken out. Now, some people might choose to put that into drawings, 8,000 into drawings, and they would allow that also. So 12,000 in the capital account. So what happened by mistake? Well, we debited the bank €8,000 there. Okay, how will we fix it then? So we will put in the 12,000 in the motor vehicle, 12,000 in the capital account as they should have been, and to fix the bank account then we credit that. All right, so now my debits and credits do not equal, so what I have to do then is put debit suspense on the debit side, €8,000 there. So we enter those workings into the face of our journalised entries then, and then a narration could be being capital introduced in the form of a motor van and the correction of entry in the bank account. So number 5 then, cash payments of €160 for repairs to the business motor vehicle and €100 for repairs to private motor vehicles had both been credited to the creditor's account and also credited to the motor vehicles account. Okay, so what should have happened here? So €260 cash was spent, so that is the asset cash reducing. So when an asset reduces, we credit it, so €260 there on the credit side. Then we have repairs to the business motor vehicle. Now repairs is an expense, okay, it's not an asset. So to the repairs account, the expense account, it is €160 on the debit side. And then we're going to have €100 for repairs to private motor vehicles. So the word private there, okay, is going to suggest that we have taken something out of the business or putting something in. And in this case, it's taken something out of the business. So therefore, it is going to be the drawings account and we are going to debit the drawings account. So that is what should have happened. So what happened by mistake? So they were both credited to the creditor's account and also credited to the motor vehicles account. So when we say they were both, that is €260 there. So credited to the creditor account and credited to the motor vehicle account. So how will I fix this then? So I'm going to put €260 on the credit side of cash. I'm going to enter the repairs, the 160 on the debit side, and I'm going to enter the drawing. So that's going to fix that there. And now all I have to do is unwind these two. Okay, so I'm going to put 260 on the debit side of the creditor and 260 on the debit side of the motor vehicles account to cancel those out. And then I see that my debits and credits do not equal here, so what I'm going to have to do is do a credit entry of €520 on the credit side of Suspense. So that is that done there. And so now I just have to write those into my Part A journalised my entries. So cash 260 credit side, repairs 160 debit side, drawings 100 debit side, creditor 260 debit side, motor vehicles 260 debit side, and Suspense 520 credit side. And so we need to do our little narration then, being repairs and drawings being incorrectly treated in the creditor and motor vehicle accounts. So that is part 5 complete. So then we have to do part B, show the suspense account. So for 6 marks there, part B. So we highlight any items there in the suspense account, okay? And what we have to do then is quickly just put them into the suspense account. So there's only 2 marks going for each one of these. So what we do now is see which is the bigger side. So it's quite clear there that the debit side is the biggest side, having €8,800 there. Okay, so we entered the largest amount on both sides, and this side now equals 8,800, but this side doesn't. This only equals €520. So you have to put the difference then into the credit side. The original difference there is 8,280. If we think about it here, this creditor's figure that was in the balance sheet, it says it incorporates suspense 12,200. That incorporates that original difference 8,280. So if we thought about it, and they thought about the creditor's account as a T account there, the balance brought down was 12,200 on the credit side. On its credit side, it's a liability there. Okay, so that's the balance brought down. The suspense here is 8,280 on the credit side. So therefore, the creditors, they're 3,920. So when we get to the balance sheet, we are going to subtract 8,280 from the €12,200. Okay, so that'll be in part D. Okay, so part C now. Prepare a statement showing the correct net profit for 14 marks. So that is our part A, all right, and you can see there highlighted in green the trading profit and loss figures. You have in part 2, you have the sales, 2,800 there. You have in part 3, you have a discount there, credit side €50, and you have bad debts, 600 on the debit side. And then in part 5, you have repairs, €160 there. Okay, so you've only 4 figures here. Now, remembering in your balance sheet, you have a net profit figure here, €15,000. So this figure is incorrect because as we've seen in part A, we have adjusted those 4 or 5 trading profit and loss figures, whatever we had. And so we're going to fix them now. So thinking about it, looking at our alert again, when we have an expense, that obviously reduces my net profit figure. So any expense on the debit side is going to reduce my net profit figure. Any expense on the credit side is going to increase my net profit figure, because what an expense on the credit side is that it is an expense reducing. Likewise, if we have a revenue on the credit side, that is going to increase my net profit figure. And if we have a revenue on the debit side, that is going to decrease our net profit figure. Okay, so items on the debit side are going to reduce my net profit figure, and items on the credit side are going to increase my net profit figure. So in our statement of corrected net profit, we have got one item here that is going to increase our net profit figure, and we've got these 3 items here that are going to reduce it. So what you have to do is just slot them in. Okay, so you've got your original net profit figure from your balance sheet, 15,000, plus your discount there, €50. And then you're going to take away the TPL items on the debit side. So that is correct net profit, €11,490 there. Okay, so that net profit figure is going to go into your balance sheet. So part D, prepare a corrected balance sheet. So for 20 marks. So you'll see the last figures that we have then are our balance sheet items. So you've got bank, that's balance sheet item, capital balance sheet, debtor, cash. You've got bank and 2 debtors, and then in number 4 you've got motor vehicles, capital and bank, and you've got in number 5 you've got cash, you've got drawings then, and you've got creditor and motor vehicle then. So all of those are balance sheet items. They are either assets or liabilities there. So remembering your alert diagram, assets, when they increase, we debit. Therefore, when assets decrease, we credit. Likewise, with liabilities, when they increase, we credit. So liability on the credit side is plus, liability on the debit side is minus. So we need to do that and slot in our balance sheet items into our balance sheet as we go along, plussing or minusing as per the rules of the alert diagram. Okay, so we have the balance sheet of C. McCarthy. So what you're going to do is just slot all of those original figures from the incorrect balance sheet in there. Now this is only worth 20 marks, so don't spend loads of time doing out your layout or anything like that. Okay, You need to remember that in part B, the suspense account, we learned that we were going to take 8,280 away from the creditor's figure, and your net profit as per part C was €11,490 there. Okay, so back to the part A, and we're going to adjust all our balance sheet items as we need to. So the bank here, this is a bank overdraft. So that's going to take money out of the bank, but you can see here we already have a bank overdraft. So a bank overdraft is a liability, and we know that liabilities, when they are on the credit side, that means that the liability is increasing. So 800 plus, okay? Now, so just remember these here. Okay, so 800 plus. The next we have a debtor. Okay, debtor on the debit side. Debtor is an asset. Assets on the debit side, we plus. So plus 2800. Sorry, the capital was first. So that was on the credit side. Capital is liability, so you plus that to capital. So now the debtor. Debtor is an asset, so we plus when it's on the debit side. Then next one is cash. Cash on the credit side means that the cash is reducing. So from the cash, we minus €2,800 there. Then number 3, we have the bank, and it's on the credit side. Okay, so that means that the bank is reducing, or we have the bank here is an overdraft. Okay, so that means that is going to increase the bank overdraft by 550 there. Then we have debtor. We have 600 on both sides. So debtor is an asset. Assets increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. So plus 600 minus 600. Then in number 4, we have motor vehicles. Motor vehicles are an asset. When assets increase, we plus. Okay, so when assets are debited, we plus. So motor vehicles plus €12,000 there. Then we have capital, and that's on the credit side. Capital is a liability. So liability, when they increase, when they credit, we increase. So plus 12,000 there. Then we have bank. As we know, our bank account is already an overdraft, which is a liability. So this is showing that the liability is increasing. So bank plus 800. So that's a bank overdraft plus 800. So number 5 then. So cash on the credit side. So cash is an asset. So when an asset is on the credit side, that is showing that the asset is reducing. So cash minus 260. Then we have drawings. Drawings on the debit side, we debit drawings. So our drawings are increasing there. So 100 into the drawings. Then our next item is creditor. Creditor is a liability, and when liabilities are on the debit side, that means that the liability is reducing. So the creditor is going to reduce by 260. Motor vehicle is an asset. When assets are on the debit side, that means that that asset is increasing. So 260 is going to be added to the motor vehicle. So that is all of our figures put in there. Okay, all we have to do now is tot up our balance sheets. So hopefully our total net assets and our capital employed will equal. So here we have €455,190, and then that should hopefully equal our capital employed, and it does. €455,190 there is your balance sheet. So then we're doing part E. Explain with examples what is meant by number 1, error of commission, and number 2, error of principal. So for 10 marks. So error of commission. An error of commission occurs when the correct amount is posted to the correct side of the incorrect account. An example of this is when goods sold on credit to Brian Brady were debited in error to John Brady's account. Error of principal, what does that mean? Well, an error of principal arises when an item is posted to the incorrect class of account. And an example of this is when a boutique owner purchased a vehicle and that was treated as purchase of trading stock instead of being treated as a vehicle.